Okay, I've got some sound here, and I am a little bit early, so I'm sure I'm going to have some people join me. And those who want can pop back here and take a look. So we'll be ready to start here in about 6 minutes or so. I've got one machine that tells me it's 10:56. I've got another machine that tells me it's 10:53. So I'm going to jump over here and we'll hang on for just a couple of minutes or so, and then I'll go ahead and launch into this session. So I look forward to seeing some folks here today. Pretty windy day out there, pretty wild. Okay, since I am recording this, I'm going to post those who come in a little bit later, at 11 or whenever, can certainly scroll back and see this. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I know I'll have folks come in as we go. Very wild day out there as far as the wind goes, incredibly windy, huge wind gusts. It is really just incredible. And I'm between stops today, working with some folks out here in the land of the churches. So it's driving around in this stuff this morning was something else when it was raining, and wow. I mean, I'll tell you what, now today it's cleared off over here, but still the wind is something else. All right. We'll go ahead and get started here. And as I had mentioned on Monday, we're going to begin to work ahead a little bit. And I reprised a little bit in terms of ice cold and RMC. Then we talked about Martin Beck. Don't forget you have these these assignments that are due. And I've also provided the files that I used. And then I also provided you some information about capital budgeting, order and setup costs in the make or buy decision, the Northwest Corner method in Solver, using Solver. Northwest Corner method is one of the very first methods that was developed in terms of trying to do load balancing, transportation, logistics, and things of that sort. Now, all that being said, we're going to be moving on into a little bit of a different phase of the course. And I want to spend some time talking about that. I also provided all of you some excellent resources here in terms of logistics and supply chain, and an area that I think may hold some great promise for many of you in terms of employment and some opportunities. Now, obviously, next week is Module 7. There's no class. It's spring break, so but we won't have anything. But I'm hoping that because you can beam in remote and you can access these materials anytime, that you'll take the time to go ahead and look at the Data Smart text and start reading in it, and look at some of these resources here that go with the cases. Hi there. We started a little early. Let me see who I got here. I'm glad to see you, Irvin. We're good. You can always scroll back. You can always scroll back and see the beginning. Nothing really terrible. Just a little bit of nothing terribly important. Just kind of an overview of where we are. And I know we're going to have other people join because I'm starting a little early. And I don't know how it is over there, but this morning when I was driving over to work with a church I work with, the rain and the wind was pretty wicked. and still it's windy over here. So I'm between stops, headed out this afternoon to go work with another place on some issues they're having with their database. So that's one of those things I do out there. I don't get paid for it. It's just part of letting folks know that OBU loves them and appreciates their support. Okay, all that being said, now I'm hoping that everybody, as I mentioned, will go this over the spring break and maybe take a little bit of time to look at the resources we've got here as regards cluster analysis, and always try to provide everybody as much practical and theoretical basis to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Now, the cluster analysis case is one that we'll cover it next in the next module, and that is the week after spring break. So I hope everybody will take a look at it, and we'll also start to peruse the textbook. Now, let me go over here to Vital Source and just give everybody a quick reminder of that text. Here it is. Here's the Data Smart text. And you probably want to look at the first couple of chapters. You will want to look at the chapter where he discusses the case where he does the cluster analysis, okay? And we're moving away now from the types of optimization issues in which we've dealt with a very straightforward process, that is in terms of dealing with with linear problems. And now we have par nonlinear, and we're going to be working with it. And the par nonlinear is over in pages 371 to 378 of the Anderson textbook. So we'll go back over there. And I'll go find page 371. So we're moving into a different type of problem. And this is the par Inc. revisit, but in this case, it doesn't conform to the simplex LP for a real simple reason. We're dealing with a nonlinear kind of distribution. And here the authors talk about the fact that we have an unconstrained problem, okay? And it walks us through the process of identifying the variables. They're trying to figure out, how much profit they want to get versus the constrained problem. And here's the constrained maximization problem. And notice all of the feasible region and the optimal solution, okay? The unconstrained optimum is way, way, way past this feasible region. And we've got this point out here. So if we don't have constraints, that's a whole different picture. And so because it is, we have to think about it and treat it a little bit differently. And as they walk over, they note expense points, and they show us those various expense points with the objective function in terms of contour lines, okay? In other words, this optimal solution and then a variety of these solutions. And these are configured basically in a contour line. Now, look, the main thing that you need to understand that this is operating in a situation where we don't have any constraints, or we assume that. The book talks over here about two important concepts. One is the local optimum, and the other is a global optimum. And there's a difference between the two of them. And it's important that you understand that. Local, the local is, it's local. There's no other feasible solutions. So we consider it a local problem. Think of it like a sample versus a population. That's the best way that I would say that you could understand it or take a look at it or think about it. And you can see here, it's a concave function. This is the par inc when we're operating with no constraints in an unconstrained environment. And here you see we get the quadratic function. Here's a convex function. So, and they show us the function with local maximums and minimums. Now, this is more like the real world than what we would do if we worked with if we were working with a simple linear problem. Okay, now we can assume linear. We can assume that the linear approach is fine, but we've got to understand it may not be. And if we have those situations where we don't have the kinds of constraints on resources, then you can note that we've got these hills, these valleys, we've got ups, and if you really think about this, this looks a whole lot like the distribution, say, of stock prices, okay, that are subject to many, many variables. And at the same time, when we work with a problem that we have no constraints, then we get a similar type of distribution and similar type behavior of the data. And the authors provide us a good example of this in terms of pricing for environmental compliance. Now, it's important to understand, again, about this idea of what we call the shadow price or the dual values and what they do. And it's just simply, it's marginal utility for all intents and purposes. It's to change the value of the optimum solution per unit increase in the right-hand side of the constraints. Okay? And it's the same as it is for linear programs, which can be a little confusing. Okay? So they give you some information about interpreting the dual values and what you get. So we've moved out of that familiar territory, and you'll want to, and I really encourage you, these seven pages here can get a little bit dense, and I understand that. Okay? And the concept of local and global optima, that can be problematic. But again, the best way for you to think about it is to say, am I working with a sample or am I working with a population? A global solution is one that works in any circumstance. A local one is one that's entirely local to itself. And the authors do, to their credit, really do try to make you understand. I guess if you have unconstrained objective, if you have some lack of constraints, then you can aim for an unconstrained optimum. And take a look. Here's the feasible region, okay, versus the unconstrained optimum. Okay. And the authors show us the concave and convex And so when we have data that will probably distribute themselves like this, we don't assume that they're linear. Okay? And that's an important thing to understand. So the three, and I tell you to zero in pages 371 to 378 because it is indeed very dense reading. And it's kind of hard to come out of this, but then when you started thinking about an unconstrained problem, okay, and the authors are going to walk us through these solutions. They'll walk us through the math of it. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at a par nonlinear key. All right. I'm going to take a look at it for just a sec, for a few minutes here, and you'll want to download it. And if you missed a little bit at the start, that's okay. You do need to make sure that to attend. You do need to make sure you have seen this live screencast or you've logged in before noon tomorrow and watched it. And we'll open up Excel. And I hope I'm not going to have another one of those problems. Okay. And let me do this, throw it down on my desktop. See if I can open it up here. Oh, it's not going to let me open it. Great. I'm having another one of those deals. Okay. I'm going to have to go back to HR, pardon me, to IS, to the folks over at let me go ahead and zoom this out and I'll show you the, okay. And let's take a look. This is, I'd ask you guys to try to obtain a value of 65,000 in cell B18, okay? And avoid using the data table function. And so I walk you through a series of steps where I've tried setting the value to 65,000, no answer, so no solution. And I try scenario manager. I could, but as I walk you through this, this is using the what if analysis tools, okay? And I can try to, and I can start with goal seek. I try, and this is a drill down process that you have to do when you deal with some of these when you deal with these nonlinear problems, okay? And as we work through this, all right, I walk to try to change, use goal seek, changing the standard bags produced, the deluxe bags. I try marginal costs. Okay. And when I do, I'm on step 4. In step 4A, I get a value. I get a solution. And then in 4B, I try marginal cost for standard bags, and I get a solution. And notice the marginal costs on 4A right here. I get the deluxe marginal cost down to 101 from 150. I try the marginal cost for the standard bags. I get that from 37 to 70. And then I offer some food for thought in terms of interpreting, in terms of the risk that's implied and what's going on here. Now, I want to open I want to walk us through this. So let me diminish this down a little bit so I can scroll across, or try to. I'm just going to take it back up. Okay. We've got the production time, the time available, the standard and the decision variables, and the hours available. Okay. And so I just used goal seek as I drilled down, and where I found that I could affect the solution, I tried starting with the number of bags, that is the output. Okay. I'm using I used the goal seek. Okay. And I tried the marginal cost. Then I went to marginal cost. I tried it for the deluxe bags, and I get a solution. I try it for the standard bags, and I get a solution. Okay. And then I ask you a series of questions here. This is something for us that this thing we need to think about is, okay, is it going to be easier for me to reduce to reduce the marginal cost on the deluxe or the standard, and why would it be? And then I ask you another important question. How can it be possible if I increase the maximum total profit by reducing marginal costs? What is marginal cost anyway, and how do I calculate it? Okay. You'll notice here that the textbook talked about concave and convex functions, and really what's happened here, for all intents and purposes, is we've encountered a problem that doesn't fit a straight LP model, that it fits more of along like marginal costs, that in a convex model they can be reduced using economies of scale down to a certain point, and then they start to come up. Or in marginal profits, for example, where profits, let's say marginal revenue, works its way up and hits a zenith, and it starts to reduce using a concave function. So all the verbiage in the textbook, and what we've done here in this case, is to look at that and to try to give you that type of case, and to let you see the ramifications. So as we did the drill down, you'll notice that it was at marginal cost where we saw a solution. We didn't get a solution dealing with the bags produced, and by implication, when we've changed the marginal cost, then we have impacted by implication the production time for each of those products. It has to be impacted. We have to impact that time in order to get a marginal cost of, say, 70 or 150. We just have to do that. Here are the constraints, and then we see the standard bag price function as well as the deluxe. Now let's go over to page 2, and you'll notice here's the sensitivity report. Okay. So we've got that. And here we are again in that situation. And as I note here, you can see that we've got any reduced gradient, and then the multiplier and final values. So we're working with the problem here where we don't have the kinds of constraints that we had at one point. And again, just to reinforce, here's the feasible region and the optimal solution for the unconstrained optimization problem. So you can see that when we don't have a constraint, or we assume it's unconstrained, then we're going to see a point that's out here. Now, the authors are going to walk you through, and I think, let me pop back a chapter here where they show you the contours. Here's the concave function. And if you look at it, for example, let's think about it in terms of marginal revenue, or let's say bags produced. Marginal revenue, it's going to go up here and it's going to hit a zenith and it's going to go down. If we look at a pardon me, and then let's look down at the concave function. There we are. And this, imagine this is marginal costs. We drive them down through economies of scale, technology, whatever, and then notice the law of increasing costs takes over. At a certain point, you will reduce marginal costs, but you won't be able to hold it there forever. You can't. Costs will start to go up. Competition will force this, or you'll need to buy even better technology that costs you more. It's from economics, it's the law of increasing budgets. And then they show us the whole picture with local maximums and minimums. And again, anytime we have an optimal solution that only works locally with a given situation, then we call it a local solution. If we have something that will work in every situation, we have a global. And the authors differentiate between the two of those for us in the text. And they give us some good advice about data, about the dual values. Then they walk us through pricing mechanisms. Okay? So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it as far as par nonlinear. Now, I want to take a little bit of time here and take us back over to vital source. And again, it's this case, those 7 pages, as I said before, they're pretty dense reading. And this is taking us out of kind of a comfort zone where we're used to working with linear programming that's not as sloppy. We get a good straight result. Prediction's easy. It's not as easy when we work with nonlinear programs. We can see it in terms of knowing it's going to be concave or convex. And we know, as the authors showed us, there are going to be these bands. And they walk this through. Here's the Vanguard case. Here you are. Here's a second viewpoint. These are good visual tools because they really do help you understand. We've got peaks and valleys. And this is because we're dealing with local solutions, not global solutions. Global solutions are going to be entirely uniform. And the authors walk us through that. And the important thing to remember here is that rarely will it be a case where you'd get a global solution. It's just not going to happen, okay? It's not very often. You're going to be typically working with a local solution. And you say, okay, what are you trying to say? What I'm trying to say is this. Every company is unique. Every industry is unique. Processes, the idea of equifinality, that is, I take the same set of inputs and run them through two organizations and I'll get the same results, is completely ludicrous. The world doesn't work like that because the world is filled with imperfection. We live in a fallen world, and you get inconsistencies. As we work through the data development analysis case involving those hospitals, I tried to kind of imply for you that the world is far more imperfect than we even perceive it to be. And when we see these situations here, working with non-optimal, i.e. optimal but only local solutions, then we're reminded that this is just an ongoing process. And that's why we want to use these models, and we want to run these models and see what things, and use the models to try to get a feeling of how things will look. The fact that there are these local solutions should really get our attention in terms of our decision making, because it tells us, hey, there's no one size that fits all. It just doesn't. And that's just part of the world in which we're in. Even if we have some things that we think are classic simplex LP, the truth is we are assuming that they are when we click on solver, and when we click on solver and we assume that we have a simplex LP. And we go down to my desktop here for just a second. And I'm going to open one of these up. Hopefully I'm not dealing with this again. Oh, no. I've got one of these issues where my Excel won't open. Great. Back to the IT people. Don't understand what this is all about or why I'm having these problems. This just seems to be a perennial issue that I'm running into. Let me see here. Let me look at an older file or version. That's not going to cooperate with me. That's just wonderful. Okay. Well, as you recall, when we open up the dialog box, we have those choices there of linear, nonlinear, or evolutionary. And again, if we assume that we're working with linear, it's a shot in the dark. Okay? And we're just basically saying, okay, I'm going to engage in some selective listening and say, I'm not dealing with that. Okay? I'm going to have to try to get this issue cleared up. Seems to reoccur for me quite a bit, and I don't understand it. I'm going to go over to the Files section here in Canvas, and I'm going to see what's going on here. So let me go down here and take a look at this and download it. It seems to be a perennial issue. And I'll find part on linear. I'm going to download it. And see if I can open it up. Okay. All right. My software problems are not your problems. So let's do this for just a few minutes because I did start a little bit early, so we're in good shape. And we're going to have some heavy duty work. I'm going to go back over here to Vital Source and I want to revisit this issue with DataSmart and visit with you some about this. Now, I have a whole bunch of resources for you, and I'm going to go back over to the modules over here and take a look. Okay. And as you'll note, in Module 8, we're going to look at the cluster analysis. And I have some information about MailChimp and the importance of MailChimp, as I said before. They work with companies to deal with spam, to help filter out unimportant emails. And then I've got the Roney diagram, which is used in science to help determine it's folks use it to look at refraction. You'll want to take a look at. I've got a resource here in concave versus convex functions. I'm having, and we'll be looking at the offset function, which few of us have worked with. And I have some notes for you there on distances and silhouettes as we walk through that, and then on selecting the number of clusters, because we're going to do a cluster analysis and we're going to make some assumptions that the purchasing patterns that we're going to see are that the purchasing patterns are they can be defined by 4 groups, and then we'll take a look to see if there are 5 clusters. This will become, and this is why I would encourage you to read ahead. Now, I really would encourage you to take a look at Chapter 1. It does talk about Excel. He gives you some pointers. Most of you have seen this stuff, but it's not a bad refresher. I like to take a look at it as well. Then here we are. This is the cluster analysis. Okay. And there's a section of this, I think, that, you know, he walks through the idea. He's a young guy. He's trying to be funny. And he walks you through an example of a bunch of tweens or teenagers in a dance, and to try to move us into understanding this idea of distance and how we use it to find or identify clusters. Okay, so you'll want to take a read. It's some pretty easy reading. Okay, and he talks also about supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. Pretty good stuff. And so he's trying to start us out with these people's data points and where are the clusters, the initial clusters centers. Like I said, we're going to walk through this the week after next. But I'd like you to take a look at this and read. And this is the case that we're dealing with. This is these folks sell wine. And one of the nice things about this textbook is he's going to show you about this book is he's going to show you he's going to walk you through with screenshots the process by which he starts with the original data and then works through the cluster analysis. So I'd like you to see it before you come to class, okay? It would be good for you to do that because it's going to make it go a lot smoother for you. And if you're a marketing major, as I said before, you really do want to be on top of this. And he provides you some good narrative here. And walks through the process of starting with the clusters. And I have a link in there on distances and the concept of the silhouette. And again, I'm trying to show you some of the theory that links into this practical application that we're going to see. Now, the Anderson student files are over there in the files section in Canvas. And they're also over there, and they're also at the book's website. But I put them over there for you to be able to use them. And one of the nice things, one of the great things he does is he'll even walk you through the functions, how they're put together. And then he talks about, he says, you know, for full treatment and optimization, see chapter 4. So we'll play around a little bit with this, but I wanted to do the cluster analysis so you could see how we take some big data, if you will, and convert it and work with it. I also want you to understand something. As I've said before, data in management science, we always go looking for some type of model that will help us understand the problem we're dealing with. And in this case, well, this is from Wolfram, and it talks about Voronoi diagrams. Okay, and this helps us understand what we would call the centroids or central points of a cluster or of a distribution of data. Okay, now here's a Wolfram. Maybe we just visited that. Oh, yes, we did. I apologize. I'm going to go to the one above it. Okay. And we'll take a look at it. And this is a nice overview of how we use Voronoi diagrams, some examples of them. We'll pop out to the side. And you'll see that, for example, folks who work with gems use this to learn about refraction. It's a little bit heavy reading, but take a look at it. It'll help you understand that this is why we call it management science. We look for a model that we can use. Well, folks, I started about 5 or 6 minutes early, a little bit early, and I've given you some things to look at. So I think, and especially with the issue now I've got again with my Excel, I'm going to have to go see the folks over there tomorrow. I'm going to call it a day. All righty? I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And this will be it. And I will see you guys after spring break.